We'll just wait a couple of seconds. I have no idea why this does this periodically. I just don't know. We have tried some days I do it the exact same way every single time, and sometimes it works, and sometimes the audio I can see that my microphone is not clicking in. So anyway, I hope we have sound. Oh, yay. Barb says she can hear me all the way to Canada. You probably heard me yelling, Barb. I mean, you probably uh, heard my disappointment, so to speak, that this was not working again because I have a great night owl quilting to share with you all tonight. And I'm so excited. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes because if people are looking around trying to find us, hopefully Alex will delete the first one so that we can, nobody will get mixed up. Because what happens is they go to the old one and there's nothing there. And so they have to come to the new one, which is so frustrating and so discouraging. But, I don't know. That's just what technology does to us. We have a storm going on here, ice storm. We have, it seems like the weather went from sort of nice in the 40s to, I guess we're supposed to get down to about 5 degrees here. So we've been really lucky. We have had really good weather for quite a while, and all of a sudden now things are not. They're acting like winter, so we shouldn't be surprised. But anyway, welcome. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here, and I thank each of you for uh, coming back when we have all these technical difficulties and not getting angry and saying you're never going to look at Joyful and Merry Quilting channel again because of the incompetency of the person, me. So anyway, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming here and listening, and I think you'll be happy that you're here because it's the first of the year. It's January. And I don't know if you looked at my podcast. We actually changed our podcast day to Sunday. It seems like people have more opportunity to just sit and listen on a Sunday, where the other days everybody's kind of busy. So we thought we'd try Sunday and see how that worked, and actually have the Quilt Talk podcast going on at that time. So it usually comes out 5:30 in the morning or so on Sunday morning. And then this time I kind of took a different take on New Year's resolutions, because I don't set New Year's resolutions, and I talk about that in my podcast. And I really kind of give you some information. I think a good alternative to a New Year's resolution. And this is kind of something that fits into that category right here. I don't want anybody to feel like you need to do all of this all at once. And if you don't, you're a failure, because scrap busting is truly a work in progress forever and ever and ever. And I am a huge offender of not keeping up with it. So I've been researching all different kinds of systems and things, and I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. So be sure to say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're from. We kind of like to know who's, where the Night Owl Quilting is reaching, because we're going to do a Q&A kind of thing also during the week in the morning for those people that are on kind of the other side of Central Time Zone, so that everybody has a chance. But we do the workshops and kind of sewing together, cutting together in the Night Owl Quilting. So that's going to always just be for this time of night. And anybody that can't stay up later, if they're in an area where it's just too late, they can always watch it. It's always available as a taped version. So anyway, just a couple of things I want to talk to you about. First of all, like and subscribe, please. Please like, even though things are not good. Sometimes at the very beginning, they always end up good. So please click like. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, all you have to do is click on that little bell. And then the more subscribers that we have, then our videos are more apt to be seen by others, just because we have more subscribers. We have more people that are sharing and liking, and the news gets out. So if you don't mind doing that, we would really be grateful. I would really be grateful for that, and I appreciate your attention. In addition, if you have registered for our quilting course, the beginning quilting course, we want to make sure that you check your email either tomorrow or Wednesday. There's some really important information there. So if you have registered for that course, we start Monday, the 15th, and there's a little bit of prep work that needs to be done between today and Monday. So we've got not much, but we have an email. We just want to make sure that everything's scheduled, that you're scheduled for the chats, and that you're scheduled that you've gotten the supply list and all that sort of thing before the class actually begins. We just want everybody to be able to start on the same plane, on the same level, and be able to go without having to scramble for anything that's needed during that week. So please check that if you're registered for the course. Uh, if you have not downloaded the handout yet, we have a handout. I don't know if you can see it. Here you go. It's called our scrap busting handout. And this is kind of my way of doing it. Now, this doesn't have to be your way. There are suggestions. You can print this out and cross off anything that doesn't pertain to you or that wouldn't work for you, and add in anything that I don't have on here that you feel like is important. So this is just kind of a guide for you to take a look at and see what you think about that. The handout is available at joyfulandmerryquilting.com/owl, just like we always do whenever we have a new handout. It's available there. You can go there, download it for free, and you'll have that information. You can print it out, and you can do it right now. You can download it right now if you need to, so that you can follow along with me. I've got it written up here on the wall too, but it's kind of small, so it's kind of hard to see. But it is easier to see if you've got the handout. And that way, we're going to just follow that from start to finish during our session today, just so you can get an idea. This is not all there is to scrap busting and to our scrap busting videos. So this is basically part one. And then next Night Owl Quilting, we're going to do a little bit more, and I'm going to show you some fun ideas on how to use those scraps. So just some things that I've learned in the process of doing my research, which I'm not kidding. I have looked at so many different methods of scrap busting. I had my own, and I've used it for a very long time, where I basically had my scraps divided up in bins according to color, and everything that's in the bin was, I thought, a quarter of a yard or small. I mean, a fat quarter or smaller. And as I've been going through those bins, I've discovered that I've got some pretty good stuff in there and some pretty good pieces that I have put into my scrap bins that actually can be divided up and kind of used in my fat quarter stash, in my fat eighth stash, in some of my pre-cuts. I have some bins with pre-cuts in them. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm kind of taking my scrap busting to the next level. Now, if you are just starting out, you may not want to do all that. You may not care about having your scraps in usable pieces. And that's okay. Sometimes you can do what I did before. You just divide them up according to color, and you have bins with all your different colors. I had kind of like, my bins are, well, I'll show you in a second when we get to it, but my bins are about this big and tall, and they have, I have a red, a blue, a light blue, a Christmas, a white, or a background, one that's just kind of multicolored, black, brown, green, yellow, pink, orange, purple. I have all those bins. So you can buy them fairly cheap at, Walmart or Target or wherever. Just get those cheap bins. They don't need to be anything that's super durable. They're just going to sit there until you take them out and use the scraps. Now, what I have found, and why I think scrap busting is so important, is sometimes we do make scrap quilts. This is about the closest. Well, I do have another scrap quilt, but it's not here. And it really has used little tiny scraps. But for the most part, my scraps, I don't use those little pieces, or I haven't used them. But I use the scraps if I need, maybe I'm making something and all I need is a little tiny piece of something. And I can look for it. I can go to the gold box and I can find a little rectangle that might fit in a particular block that I'm doing. Or maybe it's in fact, one of the blocks I was doing was a star quilt block. And I just happened to have a fat quarter of fabric that had stars that were in circles that fit right in the center of the block I was making. It could not have been more perfect. So that's where those scraps, as much as they may seem like they're not usable, they actually are very usable, and we can use them in some of our larger quilts, or we can take them and put them all together and make a scrap quilt, or we can do half and half. We can have some scraps surrounded by some larger pieces or some yardage, and then we have the look of the scrap as well as kind of a border or a frame around those particular blocks or pieces. So scraps are just so versatile, and that's what I love about them. We have, let me just make sure that I've got everything on my notes here. so that I didn't forget anything. Oh, we have a great quilting tip coming out tomorrow, and I want to make sure that you either take note, write yourself a note or whatever. It will be coming out if you're registered on our website, joyfulandmerryquilting.com. You just go there and enter your email address. We'll notify you every time we have new content. But this one is a really good one for the start of the year. And I was so excited. It actually was something that happened to me and it was not good. I committed a cardinal sin when it came to quilting, and I had to pay for it. And so in the process, I didn't want to pay full price, so to speak. And so I discovered a remedy to what I did, and I share that with you. It has to do with my iron. So anyway, watch tomorrow. I think you'll enjoy it. It's for me, it was a lifesaver. Let me tell you, it was a money saver as well. And I hope that you'll enjoy that one. So I really like doing the tips. I like doing letting you know what I figured out if I've had a problem, or just letting you know what I found when I discover something new. So anyway, I hope you enjoy that one. Don't forget to check for that tomorrow morning. Tuesday is usually the day that our tips video come out. And then either Wednesday or Thursday will be the day that we have our live, the opposite week of our Night Owl Quilting, which will be our Q&A, which brings me to our Q&A. If you have any questions that you would like me to answer in the Q&A, list them here, or you can send an email to info@joyfulandmerryquilting.com, and we will take note of that. And if I'm able to, I will answer your question in our live chat. So that will be next week, and we'll send out an email and let you know when that is. But I like to have the questions ahead of time, just so in case I have to do a little research, I can do that, and I'm not just answering off the cuff and not giving you all the info that you need for whatever you want to know. So, and you can ask anything you want. I mean, if you want to know something about my experiences or what I've done, or about me, or about our Joyful and Merry quilting experience, feel free. Please ask. We'd love to answer and share with you what's going on in our lives. It really does bring me joy to share quilting with you. And I have to tell you, I've been working hard on the quilting course. This is our first quilting course. It's a beginning quilting course from novice quilter to confident beginner. So it's really a basic course, and it's an 8-week course. The registration has closed for that, but we're going to continue the courses. And I think that they will be really informative, and they're going to take you to a new level of quilting as a whole body experience, not just cutting fabric and sewing seams. So keep that in mind. Again, download the handout. That would be, I think, really helpful for you. So let's get into the scrap busting of all this. After all the the difficulties here, let's do what we want to do here. So anyway, fabric scraps. We are going to be talking about our scraps. So why do we have fabric scraps? What is it that keeps us from throwing away fabric at those little pieces that we finished up or that we've cut off of our quilt when we're making when we're engaged in a project? We can't throw them away. We just can't throw away those beautiful fabrics. And that can be a major issue when it comes to storage. So I just want to show you what my scraps look like. I have a bin, and it looks like this is my bin. Okay, now this bin, it's only about half full. And the reason is because I've taken all the white fabrics out. The whites, the lights, the backgrounds. I've pulled those out already of this. This is my bin. I fill this up with scraps, and you can see it's not huge, but I can pack a lot in here, especially when I push it down. Or it sometimes kind of gets a little overloaded. But the reason that I have a smaller basket or a bin or whatever you want to do is because if you get something that's too big, a big garbage can or a big, huge bin, you will be so overwhelmed. Your scrap busting will be out of control before you ever start. So if you've got the handout, let's set this over here for a second. We're going to follow along on this handout just so that you've got all the information in order that I usually do. And if you've got your scraps, go get them. Go get a bin of scraps right now, because some of what we're going to do, you can do right with me. And I think it'll be really helpful. So remember, at the beginning of the handout, it says Rome was not built in a day. And this is true. Scrap busting does not happen in an hour, or sometimes in a day, or sometimes in a week, depending on how much you have. You want to make sure that you don't, when you're doing your scrap busting, you want to make sure that you have enough time and you don't want to get bored or tired of it, or to the point that you don't ever want to look at another scrap. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to find yourself a bin that's a medium to small size, depending on how diligent you are at scrap busting. If you don't get into it at all, make sure that your bin is small. If you really do enjoy it, or maybe you don't need to do it quite as often, you can get a little bit bigger, but do not get a big, huge, large bin. So my bin, I don't know, let's see, it's probably, this is about, let's see what size this is. That's about 7 inches tall and maybe about 14 inches wide by, it looks like about 11 inches. So, this just doesn't matter. Whatever works for you. This other bin is actually, it's called a 15-gallon bin. Mine is a Hefty bin, it's by Hefty, but I don't even know if they make them anymore. I've had this forever. But Sterilite has these 15-gallon. They have them over at Walmart, or 15 quart, not gallon. I'm sorry, it's 15 quart bin. And they have at Walmart, they have them, the grocery store, any place. But I like it because it's got a snap-on lid. And I like the lid to snap on and snap off. So the Sterilite's the same way. They work, and they're cheap. They're just cheap. You don't need anything that's really super durable, because you're just putting the fabric in there. There's no sharp edges. There's nothing that's going to cause a problem. I just like this one because it's my favorite. Keep it by the sewing machine. When I have scraps, I throw them in there. So you can see I've got all kinds of scraps in here. Beautiful fabrics. I would never throw these away. But you can see some of them are tiny, some of them are bigger, some of them look pretty big. Sometimes I wonder why in the world I put these in here. A little block. I don't know how that got in there, but obviously I didn't use it. So anyway, there's lots of fabric scraps in here. So what I did first of all is I took this bin, I dumped it out. Now, when you squish stuff down in here, it stays pretty compact. And when you dump it out, it grows huge. So be prepared for that. I dumped everything out, and the first thing you want to do before you do anything else is you're going to separate all the colored scraps from the white or background. Now you can see this has got, this is a polka dot. There's some flowers on here, but it's basically white. I got a black and white stripe in here, but these are black. I've got some squares that I already cut. I have some, it looks like I've got a layer cake square in here. I've got some other strips that I've cut, just all sorts of pieces. As soon as I cut it off or I'm done with that project, everything that's left over goes in the scrap bin. Now, if it's salvages or that kind of, I throw that away. I throw that away right away. But sometimes when I'm taking stuff like this piece is very, very skinny, but I might be able to use that for something. So I can't throw it away. I just can't do it. Maybe you're that way too. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're saying, I will never, ever, ever use this piece. Then throw it away. You don't have to keep it. Maybe you like to have larger pieces. So let's go back to the handout. When we look at the handout, I've got it divided. And I've got it up here on the wall too. It's a little hard to see, but we've got large pieces, pre-cuts. I'm not talking to the microphone. Large pieces, pre-cuts, strips, which are less than a width of fabric, and crumbs. Now, we'll talk about all that in a second as we go along. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to go from big to small with every single fabric scrap. Now, some fabric scraps, most, are not going to be a half a yard. Maybe you'll have a couple in there. And actually, I did have some half yard scraps in mine. I couldn't believe it, but look at these. I've got 4, 5 beautiful pieces. When I took them out of my bin, they were pretty big, but it was the end of whatever I was doing, and I didn't, I didn't fold this back up because I don't in my fabric closet, everything that's in there is a yard or more. Then I have bins that have fat quarters. So these half yard pieces kind of, I don't know, they kind of get left, they kind of get forgotten. And so when I was cutting up my scraps, I thought, these are really nice pieces of fabric. They are 18 inches by width of fabric, a half a yard. And I decided to fold them up the same way that I would fold a fat quarter. The fat quarter is one layer and this one is 2 layers because it's folded in half. So if you're not familiar with how I fold my fat quarters, um, uh, basically I just fold everything to the center and then fold it in half and fold it in so there's no raw edges showing. And I can show you one of those in a second. But this is all those, just I haven't done very many, but look at the beautiful fabrics I came up with. So that's one bunch. Once I have looked at the piece that I have pulled out and I realize it's not big enough for a half yard, then I look at it and I say, is there a fat quarter in it? So I look, and sure enough, I had actually 3 pieces that had a fat quarter that I was able to cut out. So I did. I cut them out. These are my fat quarters. I folded them nicely, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay. So we know a fat quarter is 18 inches, 22 in length, 18 inches. So I fold the top and the bottom to the 9-inch mark. I set it on my cutting mat so that the bottom edge, the raw edge, is at 0. And then I just fold into the center and into the center, which is the 9-inch mark. So now I've got these folded together, and then I just fold it in half. So I have no raw edges. They're all hidden inside. Then I lay this down. Now this is 22 about wide. So I know the center is about 11 inches. And I just fold the ends into the center. It's kind of creased a little bit so I can see it. So I folded it this way, and then I fold it in half. So isn't that nice? They're all the same size. They all fit. I do the same thing with those half yard pieces. The half yard pieces are just folded in half. So they're a little thicker because we have 2 layers, but I do the same thing. Put the raw edge or the raw edges down at the one end of my mat at the 0 point, and I fold into the 9-inch mark up, 9-inch mark this direction, fold it in half, and then fold the 2 ends into the center, and then fold it in half once again. So that's how I fold my fat quarters, because then I have a bin. I don't know if you've seen those bins. They're like 3 drawers usually. They're on wheels. You can get them anywhere. They're cheap. And I put all of my fat quarters in there because I have a lot. I have a lot of fat quarters. I buy fat quarter stacks often, and I don't always use all of the pieces in there. So I put them in there according to color. And that way, if I need a blue fabric, I can look through. They're all this way, so I can see what's there, and I just thumb through. Now, some people put them on shelves, so they would be on the shelf like this, and then you can look this way and see what they are. And if you've got, fairly tall shelf or a box or something that you can put them in, then you can keep them nicely. You know how they do in the fabric shops? They'll have those cubbies and they'll have the fabrics in there. These work nicely in something like that. So that's the way I store my fat quarters. This is still not considered a scrap. I have just basically reduced my scrap a bit to get rid of these wonderfully big usable pieces. Okay, well, maybe your scrap is smaller than that and you don't have a fat quarter in there, or you have cut a fat quarter off and you've got a little bit left. So the next thing you do I have enough for a fat 1/8? Is there enough in there for a fat 1/8? So a fat eighth is 9 inches by 20 to 21 to 22 inches. I look and see if I have a fat 1/8, and this is actually the fat 1/8 right here. I have folded them the exact same way that I folded the fat quarters, except for they're skinny. So the middle is, when I fold it to the middle, it's half size, but they still fit nicely in a bin, and I'm able to stack them. And I know that these fat 1/8s are 9 inches by about 20, 21, 22 inches wide. So these are all stacked in there. Now, occasionally there'll be an eighth of a yard actually. And I did have three, what I got, three of those, two of those. And so those, again, I fold it the same way, but they're double sized because they are the full eighth of a yard rather than just partially an eighth. Okay, so we've got that. So there's the big pieces. Now for me, I use the 5-inch squares and I use the 10-inch squares and I use the 2.5-inch squares and I use the 2.5-inch strips. Those are what we would consider pre-cuts. So pre-cuts, the 2.5-inch squares are actually called mini charms. The 5-inch charm squares, 5-inch squares are called charm squares or a charm pack. The 10-inch squares are usually a layer cake. And then a 2.5-inch strip by width of fabric is a jelly roll strip. So we use a lot of those. I like those. Now, maybe you don't like those. Maybe you would rather keep everything that you have in strips. But if I can get some 10-inch squares out of that scrap, I'm going to do that. So I looked and some of my scraps were big enough that I could get some 10-inch squares out of that. And then that will go in the 10-inch square bin. Blue. I'm working on blue right now. So I pulled all the blues out of out of this bin that I showed you before, and I'm working on blue. But this is 10-inch squares that I think are really pretty, and I like to have them for all sorts of projects. We even have a quilt that's using the leftovers with the 10-inch squares. So I like that. I use a lot of 5-inch squares, the charm pack squares. Look at all the charms that I got out of the fabrics that I've done so far. And I've got some really cute ones. Now, a lot of these, I do a lot of kids quilts. So I have a lot of children's fabrics in here, but then I have, regular stuff too. So I love that. Then sometimes once we're cutting down our scrap, we might have some 2.5-inch squares that are left over. And I like those too. So we can use 2.5-inch squares in so many different ways. So I have a little stack of those. I don't usually have a lot of those because I like to cut the strips more than I like to cut the squares. Then I also have, this is what I was able to get 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips out of the scraps that I had. So I had some fabrics that were pretty wide, but they were skinny. And I was still able to get a 2.5-inch strip out of that. So that was good. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy to have that extra in there. So now we're getting down to the nitty gritty when it comes to the scraps. If you look at the list, once we finished with the pre-cuts, remember that the 2.5-inch in the pre-cut has to be a width of fabric. So if it's shorter than 41, 42 inches, which is usually width of fabric, if it's shorter than that, then it goes down to the next category called strips. Okay, so the strips that I use, that I don't use anything under for my scraps. I don't cut anything under 1.5 inches. Now that might mean I do, sometimes I have quilts that I do that have little tiny 1/2-inch square rectangles that I need to use, but I cut those specifically for that quilt. I don't have scraps that I dig through for that. So if I am cutting strips, I either cut 1.5-inch strips, 2-inch strips, 2.5-inch, or 3.5. That's it. The rest, it's either going to be a charm square or it's going to be a big layer cake square or whatever. I don't cut anything any larger than that out of my scraps. Okay, so if you do, add that to the list. Maybe you like 6.5-inch squares. Add that to the list. Maybe you like, a 5.5-inch strip for, whatever reason. Add that to the list if that's what you like to do. So here I'm going to show you. I have the 1.5-inch strips. Whoops, that's not it. Right here. Anything that I can cut 1.5-inch wide, I put in this pile, my 1.5-inch. You can see this one, this is pretty long. This is 1.5 by width of fabric, which probably means I cut a 2.5-inch strip and I still had a little bit left over. And I decided to do cut this extra piece in here. So, or even, whatever size. So this one's a long one, but for the most part, this one, it's just a short one, but it's 1.5 inches wide. Then I have this one, a little bit longer, but it's 1.5 wide. And I keep those all together as 1.5 inch strips. I even have this little teeny one, but this one is where my cutoff is. This particular strip measures 2 inches long. So you can see, I'm not going to, I wouldn't put a 1.5 by 1.5 inch here. I would put that in the next category, but this one will work for something maybe. So once I've got these all together, I can clip them together. If it's a big stack, I rubber band them together and I put them in the blue bin. So when I open the blue bin, if I need a particular scrap, I can put a little paper label on there, or I can use my clips. And if you watched any of the 25 Days of Christmas, I think it was day 23 or 24, I had the large clips that I used that you can actually put a sticker on, or you can write with Sharpie marker on them and what they are. And I could put 1.5 inch on this. And I know these are 1.5 inch strips. I also cut 2-inch strips. Now 2-inch, of course, would be 1.5 inch finished. And I have a lot of stuff that I do 1.5 inch finished. So these are fun for that. They also work great for piano keyboarders or some other things that we'll talk about. Then I have 2.5 inch strips that are not with the fabric. So there, and I didn't cut them into the 2.5 by 2.5 inch square. I just didn't want to. So if you do want to do that and you like to have those squares, by all means do that. There are some great patterns out there that use 2.5 inch squares, especially scrappy quilts. And we'll talk about those in the future, not tonight. So these are the 2.5 inch. And then I do like the 3.5 inch wide strips. Again, these work really well if I'm doing a piano keyboarder, because I'll cut them this way and they're wide enough that I have a 3.5 inch border, and then I just have a variety of fabrics in there. So I like that as well. Now, keep in mind, these are all blue. So if you're really doing scrappy, you're going to want to do something where you've mixed the colors up a little bit, but you can't do that until you get all this work done. So this is where we start. Now we still have some pieces that are left over that are less than 1.5 inches. When I have something that's less than 1.5 inches, it has to be at least 1 inch wide. I don't go less than 1 inch wide. They call those crumbs. And honestly, I have not used crumbs. I've never done that, but I've heard so much about it and I've watched so many videos about it. I really want to try and make a couple of crumb blocks. I don't want to make a whole crumb quilt. That's just not something I'd like to do. But I have seen some really fun ways to hook together these little teeny pieces and scatter them throughout a quilt. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. So, or next Night Owl Quilting. So stay tuned for that. So what we have is I have pieces that are less than 3.5 inches long, but they are actually at least 1 inch wide. So here's one. Look at that. Isn't that the cutest thing? We have these little pieces. They are at least 1 inch wide, but they are 3.5 or less inches long. Those are called crumbs. Now I kind of fudged a little bit here. I have this strip that's 1 inch wide, but it is quite a bit longer, but I really wouldn't save this for anything else. So I'm going to call it a crumb. If I used it, I would probably cut it up. So we'll still call this a crumb. We'll still call this one a crumb, even though it is longer than 3.5 inches. But from what I discovered and what I learned, a crumb is 3.5 inches by less than 1.5 inches. So, it's up to you what you want to do. So when I cut these little crumbs, these are going to go in here, and I'm really not going to keep those in any kind of order, because those are something that the projects that I've seen with this, you just pull something out. It's kind of like random. So I'm not going to be really careful with this, other than I am going to have them lay flat. Why? Because when they don't lay flat, they take up too much room. And then you've got this overflowing bin. And if I let them lay flat in here, then it lays nicely, and I can stack a lot more. I can fit a lot more in here. I will put different colors in here. It's not just going to be blue. It's going to be whatever colors I've cut. The crumbs are all going to go together. Okay. So that's the crumbs. Now, let's see if I didn't forget anything. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a checklist, a system that I've come up with. And if you download the handout on the right side of the handout, it just takes you step 1 all the way through step 10 to organize your scraps. Okay, so we are going to organize. The first step I told you is get that bin. You want to make sure the bin's not too big because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too many scraps when it's time to do your sorting. Here's the key. Don't take 8 hours and do this, and then at the end of 8 hours you hate scraps and you throw everything away because you're tired of doing it. That's not the way to approach this. The best way to approach this is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe at the start of your quilting session or at the end of your quilting session. You just take your bin and pull out a bunch of fabrics and do some scrap busting. Set a timer as long as you feel like you can handle it without hating the process. You just want to make sure that you get the job done. Every little bit helps because eventually you're going to get it done. It will finish. You don't have to do it in one day. You can take as long as you want, but the progress is what we're looking for. Maybe you're tired. Maybe I'm tired of doing blue. You know what? I'm going to put the blue back into the bin. I'm going to pull out the red bin and I'm going to do some red. It's just totally up to you. Now, this is the bin. This is the size bin that I have my fabrics in. When I put my scraps in, this is what I'll be using. And it has a lid, and then I stack them and then put a label in the front, whatever color it is, and then whatever's inside of it. Now, if I have blue, and chances are I'm not going to have a whole lot of each one of the strip sets that we're talking about here, I'm not going to buy a 2.5-inch bin, a 3.5-inch bin, a 1.5, a 2. I'm not going to. I'm going to clip them together and put them all in the same bin. If it ends up that I get too many in that bin, I've got 2 choices. I can use them or I can give them away. If I have those strips in the bin and they have been in there forever and ever and ever, there's a real good chance they're never going to get used, and I'm going to start not liking the fabric. Fabric gets old. Not only does it get old, that feels old, that you can pretty much deal with, but the colors change. And there are colors that you can't get thread to match, or maybe the blues don't match anymore with the new blues that have come out. You need to keep that in mind when you're doing this. If something is really a color that's old fashioned and you aren't going to use it, now maybe you'll use it, because I'm telling you, there's some beautiful scrap quilts. And people say if the fabric is still ugly, you haven't cut it small enough. And that is so true. You just cut it back until it's a usable piece. And if you are really into the scrap quilting, then don't throw them away, or post on one of the sites, on the Facebook sites or the quilting sites, and ask people, does anybody want my scraps? I've got a whole bin of blue divided up into all these, and surely there will be somebody who will be interested. So the fabric will not go to waste, but you can get overwhelmed in your stash if you're not using them because you just don't like them or they're not matching anything. So you have to be tough here. You really got to be strong and say, you know what? I just am not going to use that. Now, I don't know how many pieces I've cut. This is all I had left. This was what was left from the pieces because I really did cut them down to usable pieces. And especially with Project Linus, being in Project Linus, I'm going to throw this away. Um, we have a lot of volunteers that really love to take those scraps and turn them into masterpieces. And I don't mind cutting them. So this is a good thing for me to be able to cut them. And then if I'm not going to use them, I usually put them out in bags on our free table and people take them and turn them into beautiful quilts. So you don't have to feel like just because you aren't into it or you don't want to, and you don't want to throw the scraps away, there are people who would love them. Again, be strong and give them away. It's okay. Now, we all say the second I give them away, I need that piece. And that's probably true a lot of times. But, for that one teeny tiny piece that you need, and for all the pieces you were able to gift to someone else, it's really worth doing that and finding that little piece somewhere else. So that's my process. That's what I do. So when we do that, first step, again, get your bin. Second step, divide everything into whites and color patterns, color fabrics, whatever. you're going to divide so that you have noticeable contrast between those two bins. Now, could you do that all at once? Yeah, you could do that each time you're quilting. You could have two bins and put the lights and the whites in one bin and then the colored fabric in another bin. But again, a lot of us don't have the space to do that. Where are you going to put it all? So we tend to use something that we could put everything in and then divide it up as we go along, just because it just seems to work easier that way. So that's the second thing, is to divide it up. Then I went through and I pulled out, like I said, all the blues. That was the color that I was using at the time. This is what I have left that I haven't done yet. I've got some great stuff here. There's some beautiful fabrics in here that I still need to go through and cut and turn into usable pieces. So I'm just going to show you how I do that as we go along in the list. Again, a bin for each color is what I say, but I don't have a bin for each size unless I have a particular size that I'm overwhelmed with. Now, one way I can get overwhelmed is with 2.5-inch strips, because I do, we use part of the jelly roll. We don't need the rest of it. So we can really get overwhelmed with those. And sometimes its own drawer or its own bin is a good thing. But the rest of the pieces, I just clip them together and put them in the same bin. So moving on, if you're not, number 5, if you don't want to cut them into usable pieces, you just can't face it, it's too much for you, just put them in a bin like this. Just put them in a bin with all of the same color. And then when you're in need and you're looking for a piece and you go through it, you find one, then you can cut what you need from that if that works better for you. It doesn't matter. It's whatever works right for you. Sometimes you see people that will have a certain system and we think, I've got to do it exactly the way she does it or he does it. I have to make sure that I, have my scraps organized the exact same way. What if it doesn't work for you? What if my way doesn't work totally for you? It makes no sense to do that. It makes better sense to go through the list as a guide and then tweak it according to what works for you. And let me know what you've done. I'd like to know. If you're going through your scraps, share with everybody, because I'm sure there are better ways than what I have here to do some of the steps. And we want to know. I want to improve mine too. So let us know what you do. We're excited to hear. If you would like, number 6, to cut your usable pieces into different shapes or strips, begin with the largest piece you can get from one scrap. Okay, so let's take one. Here, we'll take this one. This is a cute one. Some of these have been in the bin a long time and they really are wrinkled. And so I want to make sure that I iron them if need be so that I don't cut sloppy pieces. This one's not too bad. Now, if you look at this one, this is folded and it has 2 selvage edges. So this is a width of fabric piece here. So I'm going to measure and I'm going to see what size it is, what the width is. And when I measure it, it's short of 7 inches and it's not cut very straight. So looks like it gets bigger down at the one end, but it looks like 7 inches is probably 6 3/4 inches wide. Okay, so what would be my favorite thing to get out of this? My first thought is I could cut a whole bunch of charm squares. I could cut some of the 2.5-inch squares. So I could either cut 2.5-inch or 5-inch squares. I can't cut a layer cake. There's not enough. There isn't enough for any of the large pieces. So that's out. But as I go along, I'm going to look. I can get some 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips out of this. And I do like those. I use those more than anything. So I think I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to take my strip and I'm going to fold it like I always do. You want to make sure when you cut it so that you don't get that V in it. You want to make sure that the fold from the bottom is parallel to the selvage edge, because when you do this, that's when you get that V cut and your strip looks crooked. So we want to make sure that everything is lined up right. And then I'm going to use my Stripology ruler because I love it. And it actually, if I can get it, let me see. Yeah, it's that big one. I've got a little bit of a cramped space here, so thank you. So That's why. Thank you. So this is a ruler that has all the slots in it, and I could just lay it on top of my fabric piece, and I can cut that 2.5-inch strip. So that's what I'm going to do in my narrow area here. Normally, I've got a lot of room, and like you would on your cutting mat, but since I'm doing this and I've got all these things, I got to be careful. So what I'm going to do, without knocking my iron off, I'm going to cut that 2.5-inch strip. Okay. Yep. I couldn't get my ruler to lay flat because I don't have enough room here, so I'm just going to use my 2.5-inch wide ruler. And there I have a 2.5-inch strip. So that's exciting. I'm going to add that to the 2.5-inch strip pile. And now I have left, remember it was short. I can get another 2.5-inch strip out of this. So I am going to do that as well. So I have another one, going the 2.5-inch strip pile. And then I have my leftover piece is it's just 1.5 inches, which is my limit. 1.5-inch strips is my limit. I don't go any smaller than that. So I cut that. Oh, it couldn't have been more perfect. I mean, I have just a crumb left, and I've cut a 1.5-inch strip. So that's going to go in the 1.5-inch strip pile. This one, I have no crumbs left over. That was a really good piece. So that was exciting. Now I have this piece. I'll throw this little scrap away. I have this piece, and if I look at this one is actually about 7.25 inches by 12. So I know that I can get 2 5-inch squares out of this. I have to iron it because it is pretty wrinkled, but I can get 2 really cute charm squares out of this. And this fabric is adorable because it's got all these cute frogs on it. So then I'm going to take my other ruler, my 6.5-inch square. The ones that I use for this, I probably should have told you. I usually have the 2.5-inch, the 6.5-inch, my 12.5-inch, and then my Stripology ruler. There are occasions when it's a big piece and I need my 6.5 by 24-inch, but that's not very often. But I have it there just in case I need it. And usually I'm standing because I do a lot of walking back and forth. And so again, it's a little bit crowded here. But so I am going to cut that 5-inch square. Now, as I look at this, it makes the most sense to actually lay my 12-inch ruler down and cut 5 inches all the way down the piece because it's so close. So I've cut 5, and then I'm going to cut my 2 charm squares, not charm squares. Yeah, my 2 charm squares, sorry. So there I have 2 adorable charm squares, 5 inches. I'm going to put those in the 5-inch pile. This is what I have left of this. Let's see what these are. This piece is a 2-inch by 5-inch. So that's going to go in the 2-inch pile. That's a good one. This one is, it's 2.5 inches, pretty much. A little bit more than, a little bit more than 2.5. So I'm going to cut that off. Just a crumb came off of it. So it's a 2.5-inch strip. It's actually 2.5 by, looks like about 12 inches. So that's going to go in the 2.5-inch, not in the 2.5 by width of fabric jelly roll because it's not a width of fabric. It's going to go in the 2.5-inch strip. People call these strings or strips when they're in this category right here, because they use them for what they call string piecing. And again, we can talk about that on another occasion, but these work really well for that, the 2.5-inch strips especially. So this will go in my 2.5-inch strip stack. Now you can see what we're doing. I hope that helped you. I hope you could go through this. If we finish up here, it says it's up to you to decide what sizes you want to cut. And you can see I did. I could have cut a lot of different things from that 12-inch piece. I could have cut all 2-inch strips if I wanted. It just depends on what you use most or what you think you're going to use most. So just consider that as you're cutting. If you're not sure, follow this and you'll see. Eventually you'll realize what you use and what you enjoy doing if you're into scraps. So if you're interested in crumb quilting, again, that's something that, like I said, I've not done, but I'm going to. Next time, I'm going to show you what I've learned. So come back with some scraps to our next Night Owl Quilting. That's going to be on, let's see, January 22nd. It's going to be at 10 p.m., same time, Central Time, just like before. And we're going to do something like that. Come with your scraps. Come with your, if you can, set your phone up or something by your sewing machine so that we can sew together. And we'll just experiment with some fun little ways to use up those crumbs and maybe some strips as well and see what we come up with. That is the beauty of scraps. And it's so much fun because if you think about it, all these fabrics, they didn't decrease in price just because we turned them, because we didn't use the whole yardage. They still are expensive pieces of fabric. I don't think they're worth throwing away. I think that they have good life left in them. And there's something that we really can use and turn into something beautiful without even thinking about it. It's not hard, it's fun, and it's a great way to start off the new year and getting our fabric organized. So did we have any questions? Oh, so I should have said that about salvages. Someone said, "Did you say salvages?" I don't. Now, there are some really, I made a salvage quilt one time, and I think I showed it in one of my podcasts. It was really fun to make, but it was really heavy and it wasn't cuddly, and I wasn't crazy about it. But some people use the salvages to make bags. You can actually sew them together. What you would do with a salvage, if this was a salvage, well, that's not a good example. Let's say that there was a salvage on this piece of fabric right here. The salvage is bound, so you don't have to worry about folding it under or anything. And then the bottom piece that's actually cut off of your fabric will be tucked under the next salvage. So you've got salvage with a little bit of fabric showing and then the salvage pieced over the top. Usually people cut 2.5-inch strips, 2 to 2.5, so that the salvage is included and there's a little bit of the fabric with it as well. Makes for some really cute bags. You can make the little bags with the zipper pouches. You can make larger bags with them. You can make a quilt with them if you like. I just, for me, personally, I didn't care for it. But if I'm doing something and if I'm doing some cutting and I know somebody wants salvages, I will save them. Otherwise, for me personally, no, I don't save them. I don't have any use for them and they just take up a lot of space. Anything else? Somebody said you might want to add the dates to your sticky notes with the size of the strips, and that way you know how long you've had them for sure. I don't know if that's what you were intending on this, but that's a really good idea, because if you've got the date on there, the date that you cut all these pieces, and 10 years later that date is still there, well, maybe it's time to gift that little bunch of fabric, because chances are you may not be using them. Don't know for sure if you're somebody that still, has plans for it. But what I see happening to me is that every time I make another quilt, I add to that fabric stash of scraps. And like I said, it just gets overwhelming. So you want to use them. You want to recycle them. You want to make sure that those strips that you cut get used. Set a date for yourself. Say, if I don't use these within X number of time, then I will get rid of them. I'll either gift them or I will throw them away. make sure that you have a manageable scrap system. We don't want to be hoarders when it comes to our scraps, which we do. I mean, it's very easy for me to just get so overwhelmed with scraps, and to the point that I just have to gather them all up and give them to somebody because I know they're not going to get cut. I saw one suggestion where someone said that when you have scraps after you've made a quilt, the next day after you've finished the quilt, that's when you do the scrap busting. I thought that was a really good idea. You can take all the scraps from that quilt, you put them in a bin or whatever during the time period that you're doing that. They all match. Then everything goes together. You've got scraps that match. If you're into that, if you like your scraps to match, so you've got the random, but it's kind of organized random. And then you can take those and put them in a plastic bag. You can have a baggie, with a Ziploc bag, a large one, 2.5 gallon or whatever. And you can put them in there and save them. And a lot of times there is enough to make a child-sized quilt. There's enough to make a table run or something. And like I said, if you're not into the real scrappy look and you want things to match a little bit more, that is the perfect way. So thanks for that suggestion. Using the crumbs to make a mouse pad. I'm not sure what that is, but if you could elaborate on that, let us know. Oh, you mean just like a pot holder? Is that maybe that's what it is? If you to put under your mouse when you're at your computer, if that's what you're talking about, that can, I don't know. I've never tried it, so that's a great suggestion. I think a pot holder would be a really good idea. A similar size, something that you can do and put it together, and I think it would be fun. Oh, no kidding. My scraps do. Somebody said their scraps have babies during the night, and that is exactly right. Something happens in our scrap bins because that's why when we open them up, they explode. Because when we put them in there, they fit. And when we open it up, then, they don't fit anymore. So I absolutely agree. And I don't want to get overwhelmed with them because I feel guilty throwing them out. I'm sure you do too. And I don't like it when I see this basket overflowing and I have done nothing with it. So again, that's where I really, really believe the smaller you can handle, the better. Make sure when that bin gets filled, no matter what size it is, you do the scrap. Just take some time away from your quilting, maybe at night, maybe in front of the television, and just cut those pieces up into usable pieces and put them where you're going to use them and put them together. Anything else? Well, thank you all. I'm so sorry again for the beginning. It's always the worst. I never know why that's going to happen, and it does, and it's so frustrating. And then I get upset, and then I am not joyful. But right now, I finished, and I am very joyful because I got a lot of scraps busted. I have some more, but I'm probably halfway through what I had, which makes me really excited. So anyway, and I've got more to do here, but I'm going to get those done, and we'll make sure. So come next time. Let me know how things go. Let us know if you had any glitches or if you had any successes or any great ideas. We will share those at our next chat, our Night Owl Quilting on the 22nd of January. And then I'll give you some ideas on how to use those pieces up. So we'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining me. I am very excited to start the new year with this new fun activity. I hope you are as well. I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. So thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next time for our Night Owl Quilting.